I realized when I did the ketamine in 2015 for the first time in a doctor's office, I was like, this is going to save Western society. This is what everybody needs. They need to quiet all that chatter going on in their head and just be able to build some new neural pathways about here I am in the present moment and I'm going forward into the future. Once I experienced it, I was like, this is it. I have to, really dedicate myself to getting this information out about ketamine.
All right, so I'm sitting across from Zappy Zapolin. Zappy, we connected years ago to do a podcast. This was March 2017. It was right before the MAPS conference. And then we had a chance to meet at the MAPS conference that happened in Oakland in 2017. And we've done a few Ketitations together, which you've really been spending a lot of time and sort of effort on lately, supporting with the Mind Army and microdosing. And you're just always up to some crazy fun stuff. We've been meaning to have the second conversation for some time, I feel like. So it's good to be back online with you. And you were just starting to talk about, we're recording this right after the eclipse. You were starting to talk about the documentary that you had been working on, and I'm like, wait, let's make sure we start recording and get this juiciness. So anyway, welcome back. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. Been a while. Yeah, right after the Reality of Truth came out, I remember we did the podcast and then we connected at Psychedelic Science 2017. But, I think the most impactful time I've had with you was during the pandemic when everything was closed down and ketamine lozenges had just hit the scene, and a group of us, a small group, we were doing some, protocol development, personal journey work. And those were some incredible times, just like, when you have 4 people or 6 people like we did all together having this psychedelic experience. And, the world being the way it was, you didn't really know what was up or down. So to be there, doing something proactive and fun, that was, time of my life, during that phase. So, yeah.
And there were a couple epic places that we did it at. One at a spot that we happened to host a party at with the Microdosing Collective, which is this beautiful private venue and home in Miami. And then the second was up in Fort Lauderdale, I think, there were a couple nurses there. It was a little bit of a bigger group, and it was fun to see. It was fun to see then how it went from that to the feature that you had in Bloomberg, the first one, because you've been in Bloomberg a couple times, and so it's fun to have helped you to develop that in the early days.
Yeah, no, this is, we're in such a cool time where this stuff is getting developed, the protocols and things. And so, for me, the Mind Army, I'm here at the Mind Army headquarters, and, we're fighting for the right to pursue happiness. And we believe it's your inalienable right to go inside your own mind for answers and healing, to break addiction. It's just like, that's your right. And if you're not given that right, it's, I don't know if I want to say, it's like a type of slavery where, we Americans, we can explore the new world, explore the West, explore outer space, but they're like, no, you can't explore inside your mind. No, that's off limits. And, pre-pandemic, it seemed like, it was just going to take a bunch of time to get there. But post-pandemic, you can really feel the urgency of people, government, medical establishment, families, trying to get their hands around what do we do. And if we have, iboga to break addiction, or we have psilocybin microdoses to replace, and support antidepressants and things, we got to get to this right now. I can't sit around here and just wait for politicians and the medical establishment to get, as advanced as we are to start allowing access. Because, of course, as you know, there's, MAPS and Johns Hopkins and University of California, San Francisco done major work. I mean, this is safe, it's effective, it's incredible. And still, we don't have any movement really as far as people accessing these things at this critical time. So the Mind Army is kind of turning its attention through film, through storytelling, through events, whatever it is, to try to get this message out that, you should be able to access these natural plants. It's your right. And, doctors most of them don't really even know about nutrition. And so why would you think that they know about psychedelics? They don't. And if you're going to wait around for them, when again, nutrition can solve probably 80% of the problems they have, and they're not aware. So we can't wait years and years, have family members die of addiction or depression, suicide, when we have things that work really well. I'm just telling people, embrace what's here and make it work for you. This is a very, intense time where you have to, take things into your own hands. And so, the Mind Army, we're just trying to normalize these things more and more. We were talking about the eclipse the other day. I went up to Lake Placid, New York, and
cool.
this is my second eclipse. I filmed a road trip in 2017 and a road trip here in 2024. And the idea, once again, was to normalize psychedelics in some way. And so what I did was in 2017, when everybody else was looking at this one event and locked into nature and how amazing it is, I turned my back to the eclipse and I projected into the field, trust nature, go back to nature. And during the whole eclipse, I was putting that into the field. And so I don't know, maybe it helped a little bit. Certainly people have gone back to nature quite a bit, but did it help? I don't know. But this eclipse, I thought to myself, well, wait a minute, let me try to be more intentional, more specific. And I knew more people were going to be tuned into this eclipse. So in that moment that everybody's tuned into, oh my God, nature's so beautiful, it's incredible. They're like a blank slate. They're not thinking about their rent or what they're going to do later for dinner. They're just locked in on this thing that I turned my back once again, sacrificed seeing the eclipse, but I knew I had to do it. And I put into the field for iboga, which is an African root that can break an addiction. I put into the field, trust the healing benefits of iboga for addiction. Trust the healing benefits of iboga for addiction. And just try to put that into the field so that, next week, next month, 6 months from now, if somebody's voting on, in their area for Ibogaine research or something, or if a family member's having a problem, that they already somewhere in the field are going to be more okay with it. And that's, what we tried to do was to use that, opportunity to, speak up for iboga, and, these plants don't have a voice of their own. They really we have to step up for them. And so, this picture is me, back to the eclipse and just putting it into the field. I tried to stay as focused as I could, just get, knowing what I do about the field and the fact that, fish don't know they're in water and humans don't know they're in plasma. So there's a plasma field that we're manifesting from. And in that one, almost like there's a few moments, this eclipse, maybe the beginning of the pandemic, when everybody was so focused in this one place that I felt like if I could penetrate there, it would be a great moment for iboga and people to just, get a little more comfortable without trying or knowing it. Because, as you probably know, Paul, this iboga can break an addiction, a heroin addiction, meth, fentanyl, alcohol, gambling in a single session. And so when you think about it like that, we have this crisis with fentanyl where really good people they're not drug addicts. They're really trying, just having an operation or an injury. They get some pain medications. They run out and they're still in pain. So they get some on the street. And then all of a sudden they're got fentanyl in there and they're addicted to fentanyl. So we have to break it. I mean, if we know that iboga works, then let's just get to it. Let's educate people. We'll do it through film and, taking these things on whatever way we can, get attention for it, that we do it.
Well, you
So
took out
that's,
a full page advertisement in the Washington Post. Is that correct? Am I remembering that
yeah,
correctly?
close. New York Times. It was,
The New York Times. Okay, it was.
yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
it was like the day after Trump was inaugurated, when we knew he was still reading the New York Times, New York Post, and Washington Post. We took a full page ad and we just said, hey, Mr. President, please make the addiction crisis a first 100-day issue. And we suggested we put the research for Iboga, we put ketamine research in there, and just said, this could be your legacy, because if you could, take veteran suicides from, 25 or so a day down to 10 or 5 because you have these tools of nature, you'd be doing so much for veterans and for society. And so I think this next election coming up in November, it's going to have quite a bit to do with mental health and addiction and wellness. So I think plant medicine is going to play quite a role. You might see somebody, some of these politicians jump onto cannabis legalization, maybe psychedelic research happening quicker in order to, get the votes. But it's a very real way to help society. And I think that that's, if somebody can just embrace that, we're going to have much less suicide. We're going to have a lot less overdoses, and we have the tools of nature. And I always make this joke, Paul, where I'm like, I would not want to be at the pearly gates and God's there. I die. And God says, what are you doing here? And I say, oh, I died, and God says, well, why didn't you tap into some of those natural plants that I left there to help you out with this? And I'm like, oh, well, because this guy in a white coat told me not to. I have this feeling if that's my answer, God's going to be like, guess what? You're going back another 100 lifetimes right now. You learned nothing. You're still not thinking for yourself.
Right. We got to think for ourselves. That's where real sovereignty begins. And you've done that, and we, like I mentioned before, we've recorded a first podcast. We talked a lot about, I think in that podcast, reality of truth, your initial interest in this space, the role of Iboga and Ibogaine. And so in today's podcast, I mean, it's been 7 years now since we've done that first one. You've started the Mind Army. You've focused on ketitations, which we discussed a little bit. Let's talk about that, Zappy. What is a ketitation, and why is it that you are so and have been so passionate about this modality and this approach?
Yeah. So a ketitation is basically a ketamine enhanced meditation is how I look at it. And in a normal moment, you could just be, if we hadn't just come through a pandemic and everything going on with everything from, Putin's going to blow us up, the air's poison, people are just frozen. And I think that, we need some kind of a biological leap in our consciousness right now. And when I saw ketamine after what I had been through with plant medicine and doing, ayahuasca and iboga and psilocybin and everything else, I realized when I did the ketamine in 2015 for the first time in a doctor's office, I was like, this is going to save Western society. This is what everybody needs. They need to quiet all that chatter going on in their head and just be able to build some new neural pathways about here I am in the present moment and I'm going forward into the future. And so once I experienced it, I was like, this is it. I have to, really dedicate myself to getting this information out about ketamine. And so as I started to, work with the doctors around the country and make the movie with Lamar Odom, where I gave him ketamine treatments in the movie, that one's called Reborn. It was Lamar's first psychedelic experience. And so it was, it was so impactful that I was just like, okay, well, what about groups? What about taking this out of the sterile environment of the doctor's office and bringing it into your home? And, for you and me, Paul, thank God, really, probably that we had those early ketitations during the pandemic together, because, when you're in a group like that, there is a magnified effect that takes place there's when your brain is on 80%, like ketamine turns it on, there's a lot happening. There's, probably ESP that we experienced in there. There was a collective consciousness. And what I love about the group is after you come out of it, you have these other people that have had this shared experience. And then as a feedback loop for you, you get to, bounce your ideas and thoughts off of like-minded people. Because what I always saw was at the doctor's office, people would have this life-changing experience with the ketamine, and then they'd get in the car with their husband or wife partner, and they would drive home, and you can imagine the conversation, the wife's or whatnot. It's like, so how was it? And the person's like trying to put words to it. It's so dynamic that words don't even do it justice. So you're just kind of like, oh, it was great. I can't really describe it. And the person's like, wow, that's weird, and then they don't ask you about it or anything. But when you do it with a group and you went through this shared experience, well, now you're in this, you've got a feedback loop to feed how positive it is, the verbiage that you're using, and concepts that are hard to describe just with words. Your friends and, co-journeyers can help you to integrate that experience in a big way. And so I started to take these Ketitations around the country.
So that was going to be my next question. It's like we're doing ESP right now.
Yes, still in it.
We're still in it because you've been featured in Bloomberg. You've been featured in various other media publications, specifically about the impact on business and leaders. And that's what I really would love for you to focus on is why is a Ketitation such a great modality for those who deal with a lot of stress, who are in positions of leadership, who are in positions of responsibility? Why could that be, and why has that been a very potent modality for them?
Yeah. So, first of all, because ketamine, it is a psychedelic, but it's not a hallucinogenic. So the walls aren't melting and you're not seeing these crazy things. But what it's doing is basically separating your left and right brain, allowing them to communicate without your ego getting involved. You're just a bystander watching your brain on 80% and what it's capable of. And it's incredible. And so when you think about, a psychedelic experience, one of the biggest and most important parts of a psychedelic experience is after you emerge from it, generally you'll emerge with more empathy. And that by empathy, I mean, you're able to literally put yourself into other people's shoes. And so when you do, now, if we could actually get a critical mass of people to do that, I think we could solve any problem we have as a society. And to beta test that, what I started to do was have the doctor do large groups, 20, 30 people all together, originally in the pandemic, socially distanced on yoga mats. But as it evolved and we came out of that, I started to go to Silicon Valley with some tech companies, venture capital people, groups like that. And we would have this really short experience, which is the other thing I love about ketamine, because, LSD or psilocybin mushrooms, you're talking 5, 6, 8, 10 hours. Who knows how long it's going to last specifically for you? Where the ketamine, we know, the half-life, it's going to wear off in, 45 minutes roughly. You're going to lay there for another 45 minutes to an hour in the best meditation of your life. And so for me, as I think about that, so when everybody goes in as a group and they emerge with more empathy for each other in a corporate setting, that can be the total difference, where before there was backstabbing and competitive things going on. Well, now you're a unified group. You can really empathize with people personally, professionally. And I was seeing that happen. And I was getting feedback from these Silicon Valley groups that, hey, we are a really tight unit right now. And what we did in that one night together would have taken a month out in the wilderness at Outward Bound together. So that's the leap that ketamine's capable of. That's that, that's that thing that we need to disrupt our patterns and really expand our consciousness. And so after that, I started to do more groups. These were, I did a Harvard Medical School, Yale Medical School group,
Wow.
20 people in Massachusetts. We had a weekend. Most of those people had never had a psychedelic experience before in their life. And we
Wow.
went around the room, and the significance of those experiences, because after you, when you have yours, you're thinking, wow, this is pretty incredible. But then imagine that everybody's having this incredible experience as well. But, they're different, and people are getting what they need. And then we integrate as a group. We have dinner. If there's an overnight, we hang out and, we philosophize. And the next day, everybody's really cohesive. And so, did one in Soho for a group of Wall Street executives. Did, a few more that were, large corporates. And then most recently, I started doing it in Malibu, in the Malibu Hills. There's a property up there that some friends of mine bought. And I decided to do these Camp Zappies, where I would, on a periodic basis, pull together a group of really cool people, best practitioners, doctors, and do this medically supervised ketamine group Ketitation. And those are really cool, because when you spend the night, you spend a couple nights, and you're having these psychedelic experiences. Like I said, it's like being gone for a month. It's like you're living lifetimes in that time. So I think for any family, company, organization, they should seriously contemplate doing a Ketitation, because these days in the corporate world, you're more responsible than ever before for the mental health of your people. Before it was like their problem. Well, now if they're working from home and you're not getting any productivity, or maybe they're even negatively impacting you, if you can clear that, stuckness, and you can get rid of that, that whole framework of competition, but rather be in co-opetition with all your people, you're going to be way more productive. And all the groups I've done with this, with businesses have broken out, friendships have happened, people have traveled together, people have gotten into relationships. It's really, really powerful. There's nothing else like this. And I want to throw something out to you, Paul, because this is my theory about psychedelics and their role right now in society and the importance of them. Is that my theory is that life at right now, because of how we're living it, it actually kind of gets boring, because you're going around with your human filter and you're always scanning for danger, danger, danger. And, that might have made sense, 100,000 years ago, when somebody walked into your village and they looked different than you, that you were like on alert. But now we're in this global world, and you don't need your human filters firing off like they used to. But we're stuck in that. And so you're also stuck in this thing where before I move my hand to pick up the jar, I know I'm about to do it, and I'm filtering out everything that I think is not going to happen. And all of a sudden you get in this pattern where it feels like everything that's going to happen. So people, when they feel that way, the way they get out of that, or try to, is they go to a horror movie. So something will happen that they don't expect and they can jump. They go to comedy because the person's going to say something, unexpected. And that's why they're using those tools. With psychedelics, it's a total surrender.
Those are the two oldest ways that we entertain, Zappy: tragedy and comedy. Yeah.
That's it. And then when you add psychedelics to that, well, now you're in this amazing situation where you have to surrender completely. You have no idea what's going to happen. And in that surrender, it's so freeing, because you're just like, oh, wow, I'm having all these cool experiences with light and color and sound, all your senses. And so when you come back out, it's like you're born again. It's like you're back in the miracle. You realize, oh, wow, I'm in a total miracle. I have an atmosphere to breathe, and I'm on a cell phone to China and video. These are miracle type of things, but we're just a little bit jaded right now. And we're like, so what? Who cares? But when you emerge from that psychedelic experience, I believe that it reconnects you to the miracle in a deep way. And that's freeing, and that is fun, and, it's exciting. And if people aren't getting fun and exciting in their life, this is the ultimate biohack for that.
Well, and that even the language of that, it's interesting that you mentioned the miracle, because that's something that you've infused through one retreat center in particular that has become really prominent and well known in the plant medicine space. And I think that aspect of magic, that aspect of something that's outside of our mundane reality, there's certainly something to be said for like chop wood, carry water, right? Like before enlightenment, we chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, we chop wood, carry water. So there's a need to take care of the mundane. That's what part of what makes for a great life. But we don't have the balance of these experiences of awe and mystery and oneness, right? And so even with something like ketamine, I mean, a lot of people think ketamine, oh, that's a dissociative. It was a horse tranquilizer. It's an anesthetic. It's synthetic. And I've told folks that I've had some of my most meaningful and profound experiences on ketamine, and I've dialed it in different ways with troches, or I've done ketamine rectally. I did the ketamine that you sent on the back of my brainstem. I've done ketamine IV. The only one I haven't done yet is IM. I've never done IM ketamine, but I pretty much put ketamine in every orifice and every part of my body at this point in time is what it feels like. And depending on the set and setting, depending on the amount, I've had a very similar level of mystical experience with ketamine as compared to psilocybin and ayahuasca, and even approaching 5 to some degree. And what I've experienced with high doses of 5. So there's all these upsides. There's obviously ketamine has slightly more of an addictive potential than some of these other psychedelics and plant medicines, that it may be overprescribed, that it's being abused in certain underground. People get prescribed a nasal spray, and next thing you know, oh, I'm not drinking, but I'm doing ketamine every weekend. And so I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that. Like how do you navigate that?
The thing about ketamine that's really interesting is, you hear a lot of people talk about, is it, addictive? What's the story there? We had Matthew Perry pass away, the actor. There was ketamine involved there. And the answer is, if you use ketamine recreationally, and I mean snorting ketamine up your nose, when it hits your nasal cavity, you have opiate receptors in there. So it hits those opiate receptors, and it really can trigger an addictive response. Anybody that who's using too much ketamine, they're definitely doing it nasally. As Dr. Brooks in New York at New York Ketamine would tell you, 60,000 infusions later, nobody that's ever come in for anxiety or depression's ever gotten addicted.
Interesting.
It's really this response to the opiate receptors. So what's beautiful about ketamine, and I tell people, is that it's not synthetic. It's actually, they take some salts and some minerals and they put them together and they process them, and this new ketamine crystal occurs. And so for me, that is an organic material, number one. Number two, these have now been found in nature. There's a mushroom there where they found ketamine naturally occurring.
Oh, interesting.
So this is really something that people just have to get educated about. The good news is it's Schedule 3, so that means that doctors can prescribe it off label. And at this point, with the tragedy of Matthew Perry, if there is a silver lining, it's that everybody heard about how incredible ketamine is, but they also understood that you can't play doctor for yourself. You need to be medically supervised to do ketamine in a really positive way, in a way that you can use, for your well-being. And so this is a moment where education from some of those things, because I think, Paul, what we're going to have to deal with every time one of these psychedelics becomes legal, we're going to have some situation that we're going to have to combat. Imagine mushrooms become legal, then all of a sudden somebody takes 25 grams of mushrooms and they go out and try to drive their car, and people are going to be like, oh my God, mushrooms make you go crazy and drive your car. No, this is, they're mentally unstable people and they do all kinds of things in society that are negative. It's not necessarily what happened. And the disappointing thing about what happened with Matthew Perry is that he drowned in his hot tub because he was trying to be his own doctor. And so the tragedy is that he was in that situation. It was labeled as like acute ketamine death or some nonsense like that. If he had taken a muscle relaxer or something like that, and then slipped into his hot tub like that and drowned, they wouldn't have said acute muscle relaxant. No, they would have just said he drowned, he took some drugs, and he drowned in the thing. That's exactly what happened to him with ketamine. So the good news is, as I said, society got this really strong, education session when that happened about how effective it is for mental health. And now we just have to educate people about how you have to use it. So it's phenomenal. I mean, the fact that this is already FDA approved, the way they found out that it worked originally is that they were doing amputations out in the battlefield in Vietnam. And they were using all different anesthetics to do those amputations. And they looked back after the war and they realized that all the people who had gotten the ketamine anesthetic during their amputation had not committed suicide at anywhere near the same rate as the other people. So they were like, wow, something's going on. They sent it to Yale University. They did a large study and came up with ketamine is 70+% effective against even treatment-resistant depression. And so this is really a bailout for our mental health. And it's a great place to start people, even if they have an addiction situation. Medical ketamine can kind of disrupt that pattern. It's known as a suicide interrupter. And you think to yourself, how could this thing, break suicidal ideation in one treatment? But what's happening is usually when somebody's going to commit suicide, they think either I keep doing what I'm doing or I kill myself. Those are my only two choices I have. But when you're in the ketamine, all of a sudden the chatter goes away, all these new option sets occur, and you start thinking to yourself, wow, I could do that, which might lead to this, which might even lead to that. You're like, I'm not going to kill myself. Like, this is so interesting. There's something much bigger picture going on here, and I'm going to see how this thing plays out. And so what else can do that? Nothing. SSRIs, these antidepressants, you take them every day, they build up in your system, they change your brain chemistry, you got all kinds of side effects you don't want. And then here's ketamine, it's out of your system in, a few hours. And when it metabolizes, it actually grows new neural pathways in your brain. And we all need this kind of, new patterning of I'm here in the present moment and I'm moving forward into the future. That's what you're focused on and that's what you're building. And I think, ultimately what psychedelics are about for me is putting you in a more neuroplastic state at all points so that when something bad happens, which always does in life, there are negative moments in life, it doesn't hit these rigid patterns and spin you out. It's more like a judo thing where it comes in and you kind of move around it and go, oh, you know what? Maybe that could actually be good. Let's see where it goes. Or maybe, this is not two options only. And so it's just an incredible tool. I hope that people will, get the confidence from the things that we're doing, the education you're bringing out, the storytelling that I'm doing, just to try to, in that moment where the person's like in crisis and they're like, should I do it? That they go, well, Paul Austin seems like a smart guy and he's done the research. Like, I think I trust it. Or, you know what? Zappy had Lamar do this. Like, and it seems like, or Michelle Rodriguez seems so cool when she did ayahuasca. Maybe I should take the leap. And that's what I want, the Mind Army's legacy really to be, is that in that moment where you were deciding, that we gave you the confidence or the information to take that step. Because right now, obviously nothing else is going to work. Marijuana is not going to break your depression. Talk therapy won't. Antidepressants aren't going to do it. You're either going to have a near-death experience or a major psychedelic breakthrough. And you can't count on those near-death ones. So we all have to.
They're not so common. Better not to mess with that. Right?
Yeah, and don't wait for it either, because if you
that's why psychedelics have been used so long, Zappy, because they're so safe at the end of the day for these types of, they facilitate a near-death experience, but you don't have to go on a motorcycle and get in a crash at high speeds to kind of wake up to it. And it really returns us to this Garden of Eden. It's what you were talking about before, where we enter this state of innocence, or, the miracle, or, people, even neuroscientists would say, there's a more childlike brain, that there are neurons that open up and connections that are made that are reminiscent of, just a simpler, easier time. And I think that's why psychedelics can be such great teachers. And, when we started recording, we were going to talk about Between Two Eclipses, but we haven't gone into detail on that. So you mentioned the documentary that you did with Lamar Odom. You were involved with The Reality of Truth. You were like the main dude in that. You have other documentaries as well that you've done. I know. I just don't know.
I've got some more docs coming out. I've got one about frequency and how that's going to be the future of everything, medicine, psychedelics, because ultimately these are just frequencies. You put a psilocybin frequency inside yourself, and then you synthesize that with your frequency. So at the end of the day, you're going to be able to put some headphones on and dial up that psilocybin frequency and put yourself in that state, get yourself neuroplastic without even having to have access to that organic material. And to me, that's exciting because that's the democratization of psychedelics. That's when nobody can tell you that you can't dial up a certain frequency. And so that is exciting. The Eclipse movie I'm doing, Between Eclipses, is really been a 7-year waiting experience for me of patience, because I filmed the 2017 eclipse. And my theory for this movie is that in that moment where everybody's tuned into this one nature event that is so powerful, you're in awe, you're living in that miracle in that moment. You're not thinking about your rent or anything like that. You're just in that moment of that present moment awareness. And I thought to myself, what if I go into that path of totality when everybody's focused on nature? I turn my back to the eclipse, so it's behind me, and I put into the field a message into the field for plant medicine. And the first time I did it, which was trust nature, go back to nature. And arguably millions of people have now gone back to nature in the last several years with psychedelics and what we're seeing there. And so I thought to myself, well, this time, if I can be even more intentional with what I'm doing, if during this 2024 eclipse, when tens of millions of people are now focused on this one event of nature, if I could once again get in that path, turn my back to it, and put into the field, accept the healing benefits of iboga, accept the healing benefits of iboga for addiction. That, for me, just getting it into the field, that plasma field that we're in, that it would get uptaken by people. And when it comes time to vote in their area or somebody's in crisis, it's already going to be somewhat more normalized for them because in the field, we put this message. And so that's what we decided to do with the eclipse, was try to use it to a strategic advantage of people, helping people with addiction, because there's, no answer to the fentanyl thing. It's just absolutely no answer. You can't, try to block it at the border because it can be made here. It's cheap, it's easy to make. And so we have to disrupt people once they get addicted. And if iboga, this African root, can break a fentanyl addiction, an alcohol addiction, opiates, crack, meth, we have to get smart right now post-pandemic and just embrace it. Do not fight this. Ibogaine was sold over the counter in the 1950s. A French company sold it under the brand Lambrine and for virility. And so it was proven safe. And if you've heard Rick Doblin's story about how it became illegal, it's really a tragedy, because what he told me was that some drug dealers in California got addicted to their own heroin supply, and they contacted the doctor who was using iboga at the time, and he sent them some iboga. They used it, and they broke their addiction. And apparently,
is this Howard Lotsoff, or was this?
Yeah, yep. Howard Lotsoff sent them some iboga, and they broke their addiction. And a couple weeks later, the cops kicked the door in, And they were like, everything in this apartment's on Schedule 1, the LSD, the heroin, the Ibogaine. They put the whole thing on Schedule 1. And so, Rick and I were talking and we said, this is been proven to be safe. So what is it doing on Schedule 1? Because Schedule 1 drugs mean it's no medical benefit and potential for addiction. So if this thing, it's one of the least addictive compounds on the planet, you can ask anybody that's had iboga or ibogaine, they're not looking to do it again real soon at all. If
not
ever.
A flood dose. Yeah, not a flood dose.
No. And so, you think about Schedule 1, and I just want to make this point because people sometimes they say, well, maybe the government, has the psilocybin and iboga on Schedule 1 because they're just not clear yet how safe it is. And I say, okay, well, if that was the case and it's deemed potential for addiction and no medical benefit, I say, why aren't cigarettes on Schedule 1? They have no medical benefit. They're highly addictive. Millions of people have died, and somehow they're not on Schedule 1. So it just must be some bullshit thing. And in fact, I've been told that if you follow the money on iboga and psychedelics, psilocybin, you run into the alcohol companies. That's the people who have been suppressing this. They knew that psilocybin and cannabis were going to disrupt their alcohol business, and they knew that iboga was going to cure alcoholism, which is their power user. They didn't want that. So they put out negative information about psychedelics for decades. And now we have to undo all of that, propaganda and false narratives that they put out there because we're in that kind of crisis that's like a sci-fi movie where, you got this, foreign countries sending fentanyl into us and so forth. So
it's a psyop.
Yeah. You can't stop people from getting addicted. All you can do is break addiction.
And Zappy, the irony of it is a little history lesson for all of us. The British did this, the Chinese, in about 100 years ago, right? 150 years ago with the Opium Act. And they were essentially like, no, you have to let us in because we were making so much money from the opium we're selling you that you can't not let us in. And it really decimated Chinese society at that point in time, and kind of feels like, well, maybe what comes around goes around, because fentanyl is obviously just a very potent sort of industrialized form of opium. And as we all know, it's a major, major fucking issue.
Yeah. No, I would say we're at war with China, but they have like a 200-year approach and we have like a next Wednesday approach to things. Right. And so for them, they're just like, oh yeah, let's just send fentanyl in there. It'll kill a generation of people. And they'll be behind by generations and we'll just, overtake them. No problem. And so, of course, we don't want to go to war with them. So what we're going to have to do is use natural plant compounds, use the science and break these addictions because there's nothing else. When I hear about a war taking place, when Russia invaded Ukraine, 1 million people had to go to Poland, I think to myself immediately, wow, we got to get 1 million doses of ketamine over there because these people have PTSD. October 7th happens. I say, we need the Israelis, the Palestinians, they need ketamine right now. And it's such a cheap drug. It's, off patent. It's, 70 plus years old and it's very easy to make. And the reality is that we need to, synthesize ibogaine in order to break addiction. We have to make ketamine available. And I feel it happening, even, as much as we're trying, on the West Coast and the East Coast to drive education, what I'm seeing really happening, Paul, is that in the Midwest, the moms, these, moms in the Midwest are microdosing psilocybin.
Moms on mushrooms, baby.
That's it. The moms on mushroom movement. It's so real because they're getting benefit. They share it with their neighbors and they share it with their PTA groups. And now all of a sudden, the women make most of the decisions in the household on health for themselves, the husband, the kids. So as they're healing, they get to bring this forward for their family. And so I think, while I want it to happen tomorrow, I feel it already happening. And that's why I'm not, panicking here that, the society's about to go over a cliff. I think psychedelics are going to save us in the 11th hour here. That's what they're here to do. And nature is very intelligent. And if it believes that, people need natural things here to help with, mental health and addiction, it's very capable of putting these things, out into the field for us.
Well, I love your approach with ketamine and iboga or ibogaine. I mean, you mostly talked about ibogaine, but you could maybe cut it both ways. Ibogaine is really the most probably intense alkaloid because of the length and time that it lasts, some of the stress on the body, the intensity of some of the visions or the dreams that people have with ibogaine. And then you also focus on ketamine, which is the much more sort of, we could say, beginner, or it's much shorter. Ibogaine can be up to 24 to 36 hours. Ketamine is like an hour and a half to 2 hours. And so I like how you balance the extremes there, and both obviously have a clear impact and efficacy depending on the context in which it's used. So yeah, I just love, the way that you the way that you've educated people and how you've brought this out into the world. And then of course with Mind Army through microdosing, that's sort of the trifecta.
Yeah,
right?
That is the trifecta. It's like triage them with ketamine, put them back to factory settings with iboga or ibogaine, and then put them on a regimen of microdosing on a regular basis, like you would take vitamins and things like that, a few times a week. Because, what it is, and my friend says this and I stole it from him, but basically everybody's just trying to regulate their nervous system. That's what you're doing all day long. So when you feel certain energy, you're like, oh, I need some coffee, or I'll take some alcohol or some Ambien. I'll just try to get myself to even. But when you start out microdosing and at the beginning of your day, well, all of a sudden you're at even. So you're like, I don't need any food right now. I don't need any coffee. I don't need to throw anything in here. I'm fine. And so, how else do we get to that point when people are, have really serious PTSD and anxiety from things that are really taking place in the world? We have to be able to do a pattern interrupt on them. And that is Psychedelics 101. I want to tell you, for me, I, would never recommend anything that I didn't try myself. So when I, was able to access ketamine through a doctor, I did it. When I was able to access psilocybin microdose mushrooms, I put the regimen into work. And then finally in 2015, when I had really, as a psychonaut, done every single psychedelic known to man, I thought, well, I've never done iboga. I've never done ibogaine, which is the alkaloids. They just, they take this iboga root and they isolate the alkaloids and they put them together and you take one ibogaine. And so I went in 2015 to do ibogaine, couldn't understand how it could break a heroin addiction. Didn't even make sense to me. And I knew, well, I'm going to come out the other side, 12 hours, 24, 36 hours. I'm going to come out the other side. So I'm just going to, white knuckle it through if I need to. And I took the ibogaine, guided by a shaman, overseen by medical, which I absolutely recommend. And I had, one of the most transformative experiences of my life where, it's the Bwiti, the tribe that uses this in Africa. They use it as an ancestor-based, access to their ancestors. And you really do have, this incredible ghosts of Christmas past experience with yourself, your family, things in your DNA. You realize that every memory of yours and your parents and your great-grandparents and on, it's all stored in your DNA and you're able to access it. And so when I was coming out of the ibogaine, I did have to surrender. It was the hardest surrender in my whole life. I realized, in that moment, I had this realization that maybe I was never getting out of this thing, and I had to surrender to I had done too much and ruined my brain and all that.
Oh, God.
As soon as I surrendered to it, I just started coming out the other side, and I was like, oh, shit, I should have surrendered 2 hours ago. But, that's the journey. And a lot of times, people say with ibogaine, the iboga tells you to do something. If you don't do it, you're going to you're not going to come out of the Ibogaine experience. You know, it could be a week later, you still close your eyes, you can right back in the visuals if you don't take the step that you were told to take. And, you know, you mentioned my first movie, The Reality of Truth, with Michelle Rodriguez. At the end of that movie, there's a guy who opens up this Rhythmia resort, a plant medicine place, but his breakthrough came from my Ibogaine. And that break was, you know, not just breaking his addiction, but really gave him incredible insight into what he needed to do. I don't know if you know the story, Paul, but the Ibogaine told him he was going to open the first legal plant medicine clinic. And it then went on to tell him that he was going to open it in Guanacaste, Costa Rica, and that he was going to pay $3.6 million for the property. And he went out, you know, searching for this property. He finds a place. It's an 80-room resort, and the comps on those resorts were $80,000 per room. So they were asking $6.4 million for the place. And he said, well, I only want to pay $3.6 million. And the people were like, okay, we'll sell it to you for 3.6. And so he's like, holy shit, you know, Iboga just saved me millions of dollars. And, you know, he would go in there. Most people only do it, you know, once, as I said, or twice in their lifetime, but he was able to do it on a more regular basis and go in there and ask questions. He would have a notepad from other people whose questions he could ask and bring back. But, you know, this is a powerful really bring you back to factory settings. I recently there's a place in Cancun called Beyond, run by Talia Eisenberg and Tom Fiegel. And I sent Jordan Belfort, the Wolf of Wall Street, down there when he was in crisis, stabilized him with some ketamine, then got him down there to do the Ibogaine. And he's been amazing since. And this week I have another psychedelic concierge client of mine, Renee Graziano from Mob Wives. She's going down to Beyond to do Ibogaine. And it's just so fun when you send somebody like that, because you know it's going to change their whole life. But you also know that, you know, if they have a microphone, a megaphone to turn other people on, that, you know, you're going to save a lot of lives. And so, yeah, she's headed down there. And I've sent friends and family, and anybody in crisis really has to consider Ibogaine. If you have somebody that's addicted to, you know, any drugs or alcohol or something that's, you know, got control over them, the Ibogaine is going to disrupt that pattern. You're now going to be vibrating at your frequency, and you can make decisions in your life based on how things feel as opposed to just reacting to them. And my best testimonial, Paul, is from Lamar Odom. He did Ibogaine back in 2019. So it's been 5 years. And the testimonial that really hit me was when Kobe Bryant died, who was like a big brother to him. He called me a couple days after, and he calls me up and he's like, Zappy, I got to tell you this. He's like, I couldn't believe it. He's like, the night that Kobe died, he said, I knew as an addict, as a lifelong addict, that I could use drugs that night and everybody would give me a pass on it and I could get away with it. He's like, but since the day that the doctor gave me the Ibogaine, he's like, I just haven't had the desire to do it. And that night, I just had no desire to do it. And I'm like, wow, you know, like that's what you want to hear. And one other thing, Paul, that you'll appreciate is that what I love about Iboga and Ibogaine is it's really the only one that's going to help you even if you don't want the help. So with other psychedelics, if you decide, hey, you take some mushrooms or some ketamine, you're like, you know, really strong, intense, you know, desire to not have the experience, not get well, I think you can really, you know, put up some formidable blocks there. But with Iboga and Ibogaine, it just strips everything. Every human filter that you have is stripped away. And even if you shot heroin the night before or you came in kicking and screaming, you are going to be affected. It is going to wipe your prefrontal cortex so you have no cravings. And without you trying, there's an article out that came out that says factually that when somebody does Ibogaine, they are 1.3 years younger physiologically after their
Wow.
Ibogaine experience.
Wow. That's
So
a fascinating stat to end on, Zappy. I mean, um, the testimonial from, or just not even the testimonial, the story from Lamar about Kobe's death and, how Ibogaine helped him to reframe that relationship. That's incredibly potent. And I think one thing I even took away today, it's interesting that you mentioned Beyond. I had a friend who called me a few weeks ago as an older brother, very successful, very well off, has, I think, 4 kids, but has been deep in addiction. And as a last kind of resort is going to Beyond, because I was like, I think at this point it's Ibogaine. And so even to hear, though, ketamine as an initial triage immediately, because that's pretty much everywhere now,
yeah.
before someone can maybe, schedule out the time to go do Ibogaine, could be super useful. So that's even something that I'm taking away from
Yeah. Triage
our
them with
conversation
ketamine,
today.
get them to go inside, have that experience. Because the resistance, is of course there when wow, this Ibogaine's going to reset me deep. I'm going to have this long experience. If you first have a ketamine experience and you're like, wow, that was pretty awesome, now I guess I'm going to go deeper and explore more, but yeah, it's in this genre and it really is, to your point, Paul, I've had some of my deepest experiences with ketamine. And I think that has to do with that human filter that we were talking about, because what I've noticed in my deep ketamine experiences, I disconnect from my humanness, and human means nothing to me at that point. And outside of that, you can have such an incredible awareness and so much healing happen when you're not tethered to that humanness. And
Right.
so I think to break out of that human experience, I don't get that with psilocybin. I haven't gotten that with some of these other psychedelics. I always feel like, hey, I'm Zappy and I know I'm here and I feel, spirit presence of the plants with me. But ketamine, it's like whoosh, all your filters off. You're there in the present moment. And when you come out, it's so easy to integrate it because you were there. There's nothing, esoteric to figure out. It's like, wow, I was there. Everything's good. I'm a speck of dust. I'm the entire universe. Wow, this is a cool miracle. I'm going to watch it and see how it plays out. And so I want that for everybody. So
I do
my
too.
always my prescription is get in a good set and setting, learn from somebody like yourself, somebody who's been there, done that, and you will change your life for the better every single time that happens. Even if it's emotional and tough, you're going to leave that experience into your rest of your life, your relationships, your business in a super powerful way. And, that just feels good. And I would say lastly, Paul, I would end on this note of, I think the psychedelic opportunity as it relates to investment and things like that are very real. Now you're starting to see MindMed is up dramatically based on their LSD for mental health. You've got Compass Pathways doing really well. You've got a bunch of companies now that are well funded and they're pretty far along in their research. And so it's a great opportunity to make money in this marketplace by companies that have the money to do the research. And who better than us at the beginning of this psychedelic renaissance to make the money? Because the people that make it now that are watching this, they're going to be high conscious people. I trust that they're going to do something better with the money than somebody who jumps in later, to try to make a few bucks off this. It's really feels like the right moment. All the risk is out. And if you buy a few of these really good companies right now, it's like buying the pharmaceutical companies in the 1920s or the biotech companies in the 90s. You can create generational wealth by just putting a little bit of money into these companies right now that are going to be the future pharma and biotech companies. So
Right.
great time to be in.
And as we both know, this is not financial advice.
No,
This is
not financial.
I feel
Yeah.
obligated to say that. This is
Yeah.
Zappy's perspective, which I would say more often than not has proven to be successful. And we talk a lot about that even in the first episode too. I mean, you owned beer.com back in
Yeah.
the day. You've always been a little bit ahead of the crowd, right?
I've had the pleasure of, tuning into some of these future categories like, the internet and domain names, or legal cannabis, and now legal psychedelics for mental health and addiction. And so when you're early on, just like then, I was telling people, oh, you got to get a domain name, get, whatever it was for your business, and they would be resistant. And I realized, rather than, fighting everybody to try to get them to start buying domain names and, putting a website together.
You would just do that.
Yeah, I'll do it. So, and that's the moment we're in here. And, don't take a lot of risk, but even if you bought, there's an ETF, which is an exchange traded fund, which is a basket of psychedelic companies. If you buy the basket, probably 2 of them are going to be super winners. 2 will be total losers, and the rest will be somewhere in between. But those 2 big winners, without taking on a lot of individual risk of picking which company is going to be the best, you could own that ETF and do well, or buy the ones that have the money and are able to do the research, because the research, at some point, the pharmaceutical companies are just going to buy everything in sight, like they've done with other categories, and we're getting very close to that. So fun time, to be investing like this, and to be able to enjoy the benefits of psychedelics for yourself, for society, and financially. I mean, this is an incredible moment for people who are open. If you're watching this, you're ahead of 99.9% of people out there. So take advantage of that. Enjoy it.
Thank you, Zappy. So mindarmy.org. Zappy's on Instagram, Zappy Zapolin, ZAPPY, ZAPOLIN. It's been a pleasure today. I got to run. So I'm 5 minutes late for another podcast. This was fun. And I can't wait for the next one. I'm sure 5, 6, 7 years from now, we'll have a lot more fun and exciting stuff to talk about.
I can't wait. In the meantime, I'll see you when we do our next journey together.
I got to come out to Malibu. So I'm going to be in LA most of May. So we'll figure something out.
Awesome. I'll see you there. Thank you.
Thanks, brother.
Thank you so much for watching. If you want to stay up to date on the third wave of psychedelics, subscribe to this channel and visit thethirdwave.co, where you'll find plenty of free resources on the intentional and responsible use of psychedelic medicine.